Well, thank you for coming, and thank you to our audience out there in Zoom world. It's a pleasure to be here. Today's reading is from the Gospel of John. Now, it was not common for me as a Unitarian Universalist minister to read from the Bible. As one who was raised as a Unitarian Universalist, I saw Christianity as another religion, much like Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, Islam, Zoroastrianism, Jainism, and many others. And as many of you know, I see that everybody has their own religion. We all have our own unique beliefs, and feelings, and thoughts about life. We have our own philosophies. So as a guru once said, there are 7 billion religions in the world. I have chosen this passage for a particular reason, which I will share with you later. Again, as a Unitarian Universalist, I look for something of interest for me to share with you, even inspirational. And that could be in any place, including the Bible. This is from the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verses 12 to 19 and verses 25 to 31. This is from the New International Version. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." The Pharisees challenged him, "Here you are, appearing as your own witness. Your testimony is not valid." Jesus answered, "Even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid, for I know where I come from and where I am going. But you have no idea where I come from or where I'm going. You judge by human standards. I pass judgments on no one. But if I do judge, my decisions are true because I am not alone. I stand with the Father who sent me. In your own law, it is written that the testimony of 2 witnesses is true. I am one who testifies for myself. My other witness is the Father who sent me." Then they asked him, "Where is your Father?" "You do not know me or my Father," Jesus replied. "If you knew me, you would know my Father also." "Who are you?" they asked. "Just what I have been telling you from the beginning," Jesus replied. "I have much to say in judgment of you, but he who sent me is trustworthy, and what I have heard from him I tell the world." They did not understand what he was telling them about his Father, so Jesus said, "When you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing on my own, but speak just what the Father has taught me. The one who has sent me is with me. He's not left me alone, for I always do what pleases him." Even as he spoke, many believed in him. To the Jews who believed in him, Jesus said, "If you hold to my teaching, you are already my disciples. Then you will know the truth. The truth will set you free." Let's take a moment of silence to reflect on these words. Let us gently come back into the sanctuary and be among friends. Now, I chose this reading primarily for the last line that Jesus spoke. The truth will set you free. Now, that's an intriguing idea. After all, who knows what the truth is? The idea of truth has mystified philosophers and students of philosophy down through the ages. Jesus here is speaking to the Jews, including the Pharisees, who are questioning his authenticity. Are you comparing yourself to God? Are you saying you are God? They are essentially asking him. For one to falsely claim to be God is blasphemy in their eyes. Jesus claims to be the Son of Man, which is a divine person who comes here to judge humankind, as referenced in the book of Daniel. Now, I know the Pharisees have an image problem. After all, Jesus does call them hypocrites and claims that they will kill him. However, many biblical historians claim that Jesus was executed by the Roman authorities for sedition. Because Pontius Pilate, unlike his milquetoast image in the Bible, was truly a vicious tyrant. And he would stop anyone who had challenged or even questioned his authority. He already had to contend with a Jewish uprising before he was confronted with Jesus. Thus, Pilate would not abide by anybody who would rile up the masses like Jesus. Still, we note all the negative references to the Jews, and in particular the Pharisees in the Bible, in particular in the Gospel of John. And later I will share with you what a biblical scholar explained about the anti-Jewish bias in the Bible. As much as the Pharisees are castigated in the Bible, I think it's important to hear the truth about them. They were an amorphous group, actually working for social justice, working among the poor, and preaching at synagogues, and synagogue is a word meaning gathering place, as opposed to the Sadducees who held court at the temple or worked among the elite. Also, the Pharisees believed in resurrection, while the Sadducees did not. The Pharisees were the ones who were the keepers of the Mosaic law. And because of that, they were able to help Judaism to survive after the Second Temple was destroyed in 70 CE, the Common Era, after the diaspora. And their beliefs became the liturgy and theology and the rabbinate, or the system of rabbis, that exists today in Judaism. In many ways, Jesus was close to the Pharisees. Try that again. In many ways, Jesus was close to the Pharisees in theology and way of life. In fact, some people believe that he himself was a Pharisee. He had disciples who were Pharisees, like Nicodemus. And of course, the Pharisee Saul became Paul, the greatest Christian convert in history. At a ministerial conference I attended, I heard a biblical scholar explain about the animus against the Pharisees and the Jews in general in the Bible, in particular in John. Now, John was the last gospel written somewhere between 90 to 120 CE, the Common Era, some 60 years after Jesus' death. At the time, the early Christian church was made up primarily of Jews. And there was one group of Jews that looked at Jesus as a prophet and someone they would like to follow his message. But there was another group that looked to Jesus as the Messiah, the one that they gave their whole heart to, that would lead them to the light of life, which means eternal life. Freedom, truth, and Messiah had a spiritual meaning for them. For the first group, the Messiah was someone to lead them out of oppression from the Romans. It was this second group that Jesus was speaking to when he said, they will know the truth and the truth will set them free. The truth meaning they believe him and accept him as the Messiah. So as we can see, is a second group that's represented in the book of John. They are the writers of that gospel. And they aim their animus toward the Jews who did not accept Jesus as Messiah. The scholar compared the harshness of their language to a political campaign here in America. And we just happened to witness ugliness at the height of their competition. It's no wonder that Jews were so denigrated by Christians down through the ages. The ugliness in rhetoric certainly reflects our political reality today. We hear so many outrageous deceits, some of them preposterous, that we don't know whether to laugh or cry. And we might think that those who perpetrate the lies are somehow monsters. The truth is that these people belong to a very special group that are susceptible to all kinds of mischief, human beings. As I often said, human beings, often clever, rarely wise. Now, I know that no one can know the absolute truth, and each of us has her or his view of the truth coming from our lonely individual, limited ability to grasp the entirety of reality. I do believe, though, if we share our truths honestly, in good faith, and with goodwill, that we'll have a good chance of creating a community that enhances our lives. And that is the genius of democracy when it works. The political philosopher Hannah Arendt, who escaped Nazi Germany after she was imprisoned for writing about anti-Semitism, reported for the New Yorker magazine in Jerusalem in 1961 of the trial of Adolf Eichmann for the crime of facilitating and managing the logistics involved in the mass deportation of Jews to ghettos and extermination camps in Nazi-occupied Eastern Europe during World War II. As she witnessed Eichmann, Arendt became convinced that he was not an evil man or a pervert, rather he was just an ordinary man who did not reflect on what he was doing. He did not reflect on what he was doing. Instead, he took pride in doing a good job, as he was told to do. Arendt found Eichmann to be rather bland bureaucrat, who in her words was neither perverted nor sadistic, but terrifyingly normal. Isn't that an interesting phrase? Terrifyingly normal. He acted without any motive other than to diligently advance his career in the Nazi bureaucracy. Eichmann was not an amoral monster, she concluded in her case study in the book, Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on banality of evil, published in 1963. Instead, as Arendt reported, he performed evil deeds without evil intentions, a fact connected to the thoughtlessness, a disengagement from the reality of his evil acts. Eichmann never realized what he was doing due to an inability to think from a standpoint of somebody else. Lacking this particular cognitive ability, he committed crimes under circumstances that made it well impossible for him to know or to feel what he was doing was wrong. Arendt dubbed this collective characteristics of Eichmann as the banality of evil. He was not inherently evil, but merely shallow and clueless, a joiner. In the words of one contemporary interpreter of Arendt's thesis, he was a man who drifted into the Nazi party in search of purpose and direction, not out of deep ideological belief. Here I think of the number of people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th last year. For many, it was not a deep political philosophy that made them do this extreme act, but rather people acting as joiners who have been propagandized by mendacious power mongers. On the publication of Arendt's article, 3 controversies immediately occupied public attention. The concept of Eichmann is banal. Her criticism of the royal role of Israel, and her description of the role played by the Jewish people themselves. Now she was being called arrogant, heartless, ill-informed. She was accused of being duped by Eichmann, of being a self-hating Jewish, and even an enemy of Israel. And she's Jewish by herself, escaping Nazism. She was an Austrian Jew. Although Arendt complained that she was being criticized for telling the truth, the criticism was largely directed to her theorizing on the nature of humankind and the evil that ordinary people were driven to commit, not so much by hatred and ideology as by ambition and the inability to empathize. She described, I can understand people's feelings about Arendt because they want to believe that Eichmann was a monster. But in a sense, that prevents us from seeing the larger issue. That is a system of evil that creates a situation where ordinary people do evil things. To put the whole blame of the Nazi revolution on one man misses the point that Arendt was making. She was not trying to defend Eichmann. She was trying to understand him, and by extension, to understand the forces that create an authoritarian state. Truly, Arendt's argument seemed self-evident. Otherwise, we would have to believe that all German people were monsters during the Nazi experience, and that all Americans were monsters for the genocide of the native people and slavery of Africans. And indeed, all Israelis are monsters for the oppression of the Palestinians. Non-evil people, even good people, can give in to evil ideas and actions. Ultimately, Arendt argued that if we are to avoid living in an authoritarian state, we must promote better critical thinking by teaching philosophy in political and historical studies. This may be the only way, she says, we can avoid another tragic regime like the Nazis. I do believe that Arendt's words resonate with us today, since so many of us have lost our way. We do not have a philosophy about politics or life itself, live lives in prejudice, without compassion or empathy for those who are different. And thus they can find themselves falling into a group that promotes powerful messages that help them to feel powerful and unafraid. But sometimes those very groups promote dominance, hate, and violence. But because they give permission to express their power, it can be intoxicating. And it's also human. I would like to close with a scene from the movie A Beautiful Mind. I wonder how many of you have seen that movie, A Beautiful Mind? Yeah, a good number of you. About the math genius and schizophrenic John Nash. The film was directed by Ron Howard. Yes, the same Ron Howard who was Opie in Andy Griffith. Who would have thought he'd be an intelligent, sensitive movie director? Ron Howard takes a lot of liberties in telling Nash's story, but even though this movie is based on a real story, he fabricates a big part of it. But even so, like fiction, it speaks of a more important philosophical truth. That is my theme for today. Now, to set the scene, we're going to see him at home with his wife, Alyssa, and their baby, John. And there are three other characters in this scene. So to set the scene, I'll talk about these three characters. See, John Nash arrived at Princeton in 1947. And he had a hard time relating to people. You can imagine, given his disease and so on. And he was also obsessive kind of guy, obsessive compulsive. He has a difficult time socializing with his fellow math and physics students. So he meets his roommate, Charles Herman, who's a pleasant fellow studying literature, focusing on D.H. Lawrence. And he becomes a friend for John when John feels friendless. And he encourages John to socialize with his classmates. And then after he graduates from Princeton, he has a fellowship at MIT, or teaching time, a year, in 1951, during the height of the Cold War. And there he is encountered with this mysterious person, William Parcher, who is from the Department of Defense. And he recruits John in this mission to look at newspapers and magazines, periodicals, to find patterns, which he's good at. He's really good at discovering patterns, and find messages that the Soviets are sending to spies in America. And Parcher is really a scary person. And he even takes John on a car chase, apparently being chased by the Soviets and their guns firing and all that stuff. It's really scary. And he's terrified. And he also learns at the same time that Lisa is pregnant. So this is in 1952. He then comes to home, live at home. Then he comes back to Princeton, I should say. And he sees Charles again, his friend Charles. And Charles has with him his niece, an 8-year-old girl named Marcy. Apparently, Charles' sister married a reprobate, according to him, and the sister and the husband died in a car accident because of the husband's driving. And thus, their daughter is left an orphan, so Charles is taking care of Marcy, a beautiful girl, dark hair, dark eyes, a bit of sadness in her countenance, as you can imagine, losing two parents. And it's there that Charles encourages John to marry Lisa. It's then. So over time, John's disease worsens such that Elisa has to commit him to an asylum. She's convinced to commit to an asylum under the care of a Dr. Rosen. Dr. Rosen tells Elisa that John has schizophrenia and that Charles, Marcy, and William Parcher, exist only in his imagination. He had to convince her of this because John was so convincing that these people were real, that she thought they might be real too. So Nash is given a course of insulin shock therapy and eventually is released. And then he comes back home in 1956 and he stops taking his antipsychotic medicine because it frustrates him with side effects, including being able to make love to his wife. But maybe even more important, it prevented him from doing his special work, this secret work of discerning messages in newspapers and magazines, hundreds. And he starts to see Parcher, William Parcher and Charles Herman again. So what you're going to see is this climatic scene. John is given the baby to to give a bath. And Elisa is getting the laundry off the clothesline when a storm is coming. And she notices the door to the shed is open and goes in to discover a cavern of thousands of strips of newspaper and magazines marked to show the patterns with twine connecting a spider web of intrigue. She is frightened because she knows that John has descended back into psychosis. So we will now watch the clip.
Charles was watching him. He was okay.
There's no one here.
Charles was watching him. He's been injected with a cloaking serum. I can see him because of the chemical that was released into my bloodstream when my implant dissolved. I couldn't tell you. It was for your own protection. Alicia! No.
Hello, I need Dr. Rosen's office, please.
You gotta stop her, John. You leave her out of this.
Who are you talking to?
It's not her fault.
John.
She'll compromise us again.
No, she won't.
You'll go back to the hospital.
John, answer me!
Countless people will die.
Alicia, please, put the phone down.
I can't let that happen.
Yes. Hello. Hi, I need Dr. Rosen. Is he in?
I'm sorry, John.
No!
You know what you have to do, Nash. She's too great a risk.
Get away!
I didn't mean to hurt you. Finish her. She knows too much now.
Uncle John?
You take care of her, you pathetic piece of shit, or I'll take care of you. John. Oh, Christ, John, please. Do what he says. Move, soldier. Now.
Uncle John.
John, please. Now!
Machine Charles can coexist with things like watching the Charles
Charles is watching her.
With Alicia.
I understand.
She never gets old. Marcy can't be real. She never gets old.
So John has a realization. He now knows the truth that Charles, William, and Marcy are figments of his imagination. The problem for John Nash is that those characters are as real to him as you are to me or I to you. They each represent a need in John's life. Charles offered friendship when he had no friends. Parchard offered him recognition for his mathematical brilliancy. And Marcy offered him joy and innocence and the beauty of life, and a certain vulnerability that could touch his own grief. It took some painful thinking for John to stop relating to them, even though he still saw them. But his realization that they were not real helped him to heal himself and his relationships, in particular to Elisa. In time, he was able to tutor students at Princeton and find peace of mind and love. John's illusions represent illusions we all have. They're so real to us that we're not even aware that they're not based in reality. But those illusions can get us into trouble. Some say that we live in time of division, that we hate each other, that we make each other the enemy, that we cannot trust one another. I say rather, we're living in a time of illusion. It's time to be disillusioned. We need a similar kind of revelation that John Nash experienced when he realized that Marcy never grew old. It's not easy, but what we can do is make a commitment to speaking our truth as we know it and seeking truth from others. It is in the trying in good faith with goodwill that we can create a loving community, but also democracy that is vital. It gives us a chance to create a nation based in freedom and fairness. Therefore, this is our time to reflect deeply on our lives, to take responsibility for ourselves, for our thoughts and our own feelings. This is our time to be open to reality in other people, such that we can respect them, even if we do not agree with them. If we can do that, and I know it's not an easy task, then we increase the odds that we will know the truth. The truth will set us free.